friends, colleagues, and all who have gathered here today, let me begin by saying we are living in a moment of history that will be remembered not just for its bloodshed, but for the clarity with which global powers are finally showing their true faces. From Qatar comes breaking news that has stunned the geopolitical landscape. Turkey, under President Erdogan, has issued a strong and unmistakable threat to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Erdogan has warned Israel in direct terms, continued aggression will not go unanswered, and war is now a very real possibility. At the same time, Netanyahu, rather than de-escalating, is standing in front of Trump's close aide and defending Israel's military attack on Doha. This confrontation is not just about nations. It is about the very structure of power empire and resistance in the 21st century. We must ask why now? Why is Erdogan, a leader who has often played both sides between East and West, choosing this moment to throw down a gauntlet before Netanyahu? The answer lies in a simple but dangerous truth. Israel's actions have crossed a red line in the Arab and Muslim world. The attack on Doha was not only a military provocation, but a symbolic strike at one of the Gulf's most influential states. Qatar, a nation central to regional diplomacy, energy markets, and global politics, cannot be treated as just another pawn. By defending this act of aggression to Trump's aid, Netanyahu is declaring that Israel's power will be exercised with impunity and that American backing remains his shield. But Erdogan's threat cracks open the illusion of untouchable Israeli dominance. Make no mistake, this is not merely a bilateral dispute. This is the collision of broader forces. On one side, Israel, armed and funded by the United States, continues a long campaign of military assertion. On the other side, Turkey and Qatar, two nations that, despite their own contradictions, are stepping forward to challenge what they see as an unacceptable imperial arrogance. The Middle East has always been the stage where empire asserts itself, but today, with Turkey issuing war threats and Qatar at the center of conflict, we see something far more dangerous, a regional order inching closer to collapse. We need to understand the economic undercurrents. Wars are never just about religion or ideology. They are about resources, trade routes, and profits. Qatar is one of the largest exporters of natural gas in the world, and its energy wealth positions it as a critical player. Any attack on Qatar is, therefore, an attack on energy markets, on the flow of capital, and on the global economy. Erdogan knows this. He sees that Israel's attack, if left unchallenged, would not only humiliate Qatar, but also open the door to further assaults on Muslim majority states that hold strategic economic power. By raising the specter of war, Erdogan is not just defending Qatar, he is defending Turkey's own future role in a Middle East dominated by energy politics. But let us also be clear, Erdogan's words are not enough. History has shown us that threats, no matter how loud, must be backed by action to carry real weight. Will Turkey truly risk open war with Israel? Will NATO, of which Turkey is a member, tolerate such a confrontation? These are the questions that hover over today's announcements. And here lies the global hypocrisy. While Israel justifies its violence in Doha before Trump's aid, The so-called champions of peace and democracy in Washington and Brussels remain silent. Once again, their silence is complicity. And yet, here is the hook that should grip us all: the Middle East is no longer the passive playground of imperial powers. From Gaza to Doha, from Ankara to Tehran, nations are asserting themselves in ways that Washington and Tel Aviv did not anticipate. We are watching the birth pains of a new geopolitical order, one in which the arrogance of unchecked military force may finally meet a counterbalance, not through diplomacy, but through the real and terrifying prospect of war. Friends, we must think about what this means for ordinary people, the workers, the families, the children. War is never paid for by leaders. Erdogan will not lose his palace. Netanyahu will not lose his position. Trump's aide will not lose his luxury. It will be ordinary people in Israel, in Turkey, in Qatar, and across the Middle East who will pay the price. They will pay with their livelihoods, their homes, and too often, their lives. And here lies the true obscenity. Elites play geopolitical chess, while workers and the poor serve as the pawns. Turkey has escalated tensions in the Middle East by issuing a direct and strong threat to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and this single development has sent shockwaves across the political, economic, and security landscape of the region. President Erdogan's warning to Israel was not delivered in vague or diplomatic terms. It was blunt, forceful, and filled with a tone that made clear Turkey is no longer willing to remain a spectator. The moment Netanyahu defended Israel's assault on Doha in front of a close aide to former U.S. President Donald Trump, the geopolitical fault lines became impossible to ignore. What we are witnessing is not just an exchange of rhetoric, but the opening chapter of a potential confrontation that could redefine power dynamics in the Middle East. The hook here is simple: when a NATO power like Turkey threatens war against Israel, the world is forced to pay attention. Erdogan's threat is more than symbolic. It signals that Turkey sees Israel's attack on Doha as an unacceptable escalation, one that risks destabilizing the Gulf and undermining the balance of power. For years, Turkey has carefully maneuvered between East and West, positioning itself as both a Muslim majority nation with historical influence and a member of NATO with ties to Europe and the United States. But this threat to Netanyahu represents a pivot, a choice to openly side with Qatar against Israel, even if it means clashing with Washington's most loyal ally in the region. Erdogan knows the stakes are enormous, yet the very fact that he issued such a warning suggests that Turkey is prepared to risk isolation if it believes its strategic interests and regional prestige are on the line. At the center of this unfolding drama is Qatar, a small but extraordinarily influential state. Its wealth from natural gas exports has allowed it to play a diplomatic role far beyond its size, often serving as a broker in regional conflicts. An attack on Doha, therefore, is not simply an attack on Qatari soil. It is a strike against one of the Gulf's most powerful actors in energy, media, and diplomacy. Netanyahu's defense of this assault before Trump's aide underscores how emboldened Israel has become, confident that its actions will be justified or at least tolerated by Washington's political elite. The fact that Netanyahu chose this moment to justify aggression reveals not only his disregard for international opinion, but also his calculation that U.S. backing remains firm regardless of the consequences. And here lies another hook. Israel is betting on impunity, while Turkey is betting on confrontation. Both cannot be right at the same time. The economic dimensions of this conflict must not be underestimated. Qatar's role as one of the world's largest natural gas exporters makes it indispensable to global energy markets. Any attempt to destabilize Doha threatens the stability of energy supply chains that power Europe and Asia. Erdogan, fully aware of this, understands that defending Qatar is not only a gesture of solidarity, but also a defense of Turkey's own economic interests. An unstable Qatar would mean volatile energy prices, weakened regional alliances, and greater reliance on Western controlled energy networks. By raising the specter of war, Erdogan is sending a message not only to Netanyahu, but also to the broader international community. Turkey will not stand by while the architecture of regional energy and political influence is reshaped by Israeli aggression. There is also the question of NATO. Turkey's membership in the alliance complicates the picture because a direct military confrontation with Israel, backed by the United States, would place NATO in uncharted territory. Would the alliance tolerate one of its members threatening war against America's closest partner in the Middle East? Would Washington use its influence to restrain Ankara, or would the cracks within NATO grow deeper as Erdogan insists on pursuing his own course? These uncertainties reveal the fragile state of global alliances where economic interests, military commitments, and political loyalties collide in ways that could easily spiral out of control. The hook that grips us here is the unpredictability. No one can say with confidence how NATO or the United States will respond if Erdogan's words turn into action. What makes this confrontation even more significant is the silence of the so-called international community. Western governments, so quick to lecture others about human rights and stability, have offered little more than muted concern while Netanyahu justifies the attack on Doha. This silence is not neutrality, it is complicity. It shows that when the aggressor is Israel, and when the audience includes an aide close to Trump, the rules of international law become flexible, the principles of sovereignty become negotiable, and the value of peace is quietly set aside. Erdogan's threat, in this context, becomes not just a military warning, but also a political challenge to the hypocrisy of Western powers. For ordinary people across the region, however, these high-level power plays translate into real and devastating consequences. Every escalation, every threat, every defensive military aggression means more instability, more displacement, and more suffering for workers, families, and children in the Middle East. The leaders will not bear the costs of war. The ordinary people will. They will face the rising prices, the destruction of infrastructure, and the loss of lives. This is the cruel irony of global politics. Leaders play games of power and prestige, while the powerless are left to pay the price. And so, as Turkey and Israel edge closer to confrontation, with Qatar caught in the middle and the United States quietly backing Netanyahu, we are left with an undeniable truth. The Middle East is on the brink of a new chapter, one that could ignite war, destabilize global energy markets, and expose the fault lines of international alliances. The hook that we cannot ignore is this: when Turkey issues a war threat, when Israel justifies aggression, and when Qatar stands at the center of it all, the world is not watching another episode of regional tension. It is watching the potential birth of a crisis that could reshape the global order. So, as we close, I leave you with this thought: when Turkey threatens Israel, when Netanyahu defends war crimes before American power, and when Qatar becomes the battleground of the future, we must not lose sight of the bigger picture. This is not just a regional conflict. This is a mirror held up to global capitalism and empire, showing us its ugliest face. If we want peace, if we want justice, then we must demand not only an end to wars, but a transformation of the economic and political systems that make wars inevitable. The world cannot afford another chapter written in blood, written for profit, and written at the expense of ordinary people. Thank you.